On the day of my 70th birthday, when I passed away, I lay on the bed so dazed that I couldn't even distinguish the outline of a person. In the 50 years we've been married, did you ever like me for even a single day? Seeing her stammering like that, I didn't even need her to speak. I already understood. I whispered the last words to her. If I could live again, I would never chase after you, even if I had to die. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in the year of my college entrance exam. This time, I was determined to keep my distance from Sue Ran. But who would have thought, just a month before the exam, she suddenly transferred into our class. Not only did she transfer, but she also told the teacher she wanted to sit next to me. As I moved to the side, she grabbed my collar and leaned in with a mischievous smile. Lu Chen, you short-lived ghost. Why did you die so early last time? There were things I never got to say. When I woke up again, I found myself back 3 months before the college entrance exam. I got familiar with this young body and glanced at the students around me, seriously listening to the lessons. This wasn't a dream. Perhaps because of my strong will just before I died in my last life, I really had been reborn, since fate had given me this one chance. In this life, I would never go after Sue Ran again. In my previous life, because the Sue family's company faced some difficulties, the Sue family proposed to marry into my Lu family. In order to cooperate with my family's company, Sue Ran was well known as a top student from our school. She was at the level of a top student. Later, she became an international violin master. As for me, I was a back row, window seat type of student, the kind from a small town king's family. I barely made it into a third-tier college. After graduation, I followed my family's arrangement and went to learn at the family company. Eventually, I took my father's place. Because Sue Ran was beautiful and understanding, my father happily agreed to our marriage, and I was more than willing. But at that time, Sue Ran had someone she loved. The Sue family forcibly separated them and made Sue Ran marry me. After marriage, Sue Ran was never happy. No matter how well I treated her, no matter how much I did, she never once gave me a smile. So, before my death, I finally asked her, did you ever love me for even a single day in 50 years? The truth was, 50 years couldn't move her. And this life, I would not bother her anymore. But the cooperation between the Sue family and mine, I would not interfere with. Because a few years later, the Sue family's company would grow beyond imagination. The Lu family would also benefit greatly. So, there's no problem in cooperating with the Sue family. I won't interfere, but there's no need for the Sue family to sell their daughter to me. In this life, what I need to do is focus on my studies to make up for the regrets of my past life, and then use the knowledge I'll accumulate over the next 50 years. So, in this time before the college entrance exam, I studied like a madman. My classmates were shocked, seeing me like I had become a different person. They were astonished. Lu Chen, you're not playing basketball after class anymore. You're not sneaking off to smoke in the bathroom either. Are you possessed by a ghost? I smiled and replied, I've traveled back from 50 years into the past. In my previous life, I didn't get into a prestigious university, which became a regret. So now I'm here to make up for it. Naturally, my desk mate thought I was crazy. A king-level figure sitting by the window in the back row, still hoping to get into a top university, was just a fool's dream. I didn't care what others thought of me. I didn't even believe it myself. I was reborn. Half a month later, my dad called and asked me to come home early after school because there were guests in the evening. He also asked me to buy some gifts for girls. I knew the Sue family was coming over. Sue Ran was coming. In my past life, I had thought we were just high school students. Things like lipstick and bags seemed inappropriate. So I put a lot of thought into it and bought several large bags of gifts. Big stuffed animals, dolls, crafts, everything you could think of. But Suran just glanced at them coldly and said, "Childish. I can't imagine how hard life would be with someone like you. But in this life, I still bought a few big bags. But this time, they were even more childish. Toy cars, Barbie dolls, remote-controlled cars, and so on. Almost all toys for kids. I carried the big bags of gifts and returned home. I saw a teen-year-old Suran again. I froze for a moment. She was still as cold as ever. And as beautiful. I exuded an aura of nobility. In my previous life, I was completely captivated by her the moment we met, losing my mind. But in this life, it was only for a brief moment. I didn't look at her again, no matter how beautiful she was. I knew she wasn't meant for me. In this life, I didn't want any interaction with her. When my dad saw me come back and noticed the large number of things I was carrying, he quickly winked at me. Then, pretending to be unaware, he said, "Son, your first meeting with Ziran, and you brought her so many gifts? I don't remember you ever being so thoughtful with me." I couldn't be bothered to respond to him. I simply carried the big bags and went to the living room. I casually dropped them, and the toys inside scattered all over the floor. A remote-controlled car even lost its wheels. I wiped my hands and said to the cold-faced Suran, "These are the gifts my dad asked me to bring for you. I was in a rush, so I bought them from a street vendor. Otherwise, I would have gone to a big supermarket to buy something of better quality." When my dad saw the mess of 3-year-old toys on the floor, he angrily picked up a spatula to hit me. But I wasn't afraid. In my past life, I was 70 years old, and my dad is now under 40. So, logically, I should be the elder. I lay back on the sofa, crossed my legs, and with a change of expression, I scolded him in the tone I had used when reprimanding my grandson in my past life. "Look at you, a grown man, and not even showing a bit of adult behavior. What kind of manners are these?" My dad, and both Suran and her parents were stunned. After a while, my dad awkwardly smiled. "I have a good relationship with my son, and usually we don't pay much attention when we talk without outsiders around. So, he doesn't see you as outsiders." When Suran's parents heard this, they couldn't help but smile widely. But Suran kept a straight face. Frowning, she probably thought that in this life, I would still want to become a family with her. But this life, I didn't want to waste 50 years with someone who didn't love me. I walked up to her and coldly said, "If you don't like the gifts I bought, then I'll just take them back and play with them myself." Saying that, I was about to take them back, but she snatched a Barbie princess from my hands and said, "I like it." I was shocked. She smiled at me. "How is this even possible? This is outrageous. Mom, open the door to outrageousness." This is the first time in 50 years of knowing her that she smiled at me. Could she not be Suran? Or was she possessed by someone else? Or maybe this Barbie princess truly hit the spot for her? I couldn't be bothered to think about it, no matter what she was like. In this life, I wouldn't have any interactions with her. I directly reached out and snatched the Barbie princess back. With a cold expression, "I'm sorry. This Barbie princess is for me. The rest are yours." They were all confused and puzzled. My dad couldn't help but curse, "Are you crazy?" Because I was acting very out of character today. I thought this would make Suran angry and result in us never speaking to each other again. But to my surprise, she held the toys I bought with a faint smile on her face. In my past life, when I bought her those jewelry worth tens of thousands, even millions, and expensive bags, she never said a word more to me. Could her hobby really be these children's toys? I found her behavior a bit irrational. When dinner started, my dad and her parents kept chatting away, but I remained indifferent. although she didn't speak. I knew she was deeply resisting because she had a childhood friend, 1 year younger than her. In my past life, I heard that my presence broke them apart. So in this life, I'd let them be together. I just hoped that Su-ran and I would never have anything to do with each other again. It wasn't until midnight, when her family was about to leave, that I still hadn't said a word to her. My dad dragged me to send them to the door, and Su-ran suddenly said she had forgotten her backpack, and it was left on the sofa. My dad asked me to go grab it for her, and with reluctance, I brought it to her. I handed it to her, and she calmly said, "Thank you." She even said thank you to me. I remained expressionless and didn't respond. I just turned and went back to my room. Behind me, I heard my dad explaining, saying I've been in a bad mood lately, and that I don't usually act like this. Make sure this doesn't affect the marriage between our families. The next day, I went to school as usual. The class was only halfway through when the homeroom teacher announced that we had a new student today. Then the new student arrived. I was stunned because the new student was none other than Su-ran. The homeroom teacher briefly introduced her and then asked Su-ran to sit in the front row. Su-ran's grades at the previous top school were always among the top, and now in our third-tier school, it wasn't an exaggeration to say she was the best in the whole school. Su-ran had a sweet appearance and dressed youthfully and beautifully. All the boys in the class were enthusiastic, inviting her to sit with them. But after being glared at by the homeroom teacher, they quickly calmed down. The teacher then arranged for Su-ran to sit next to the class monitor. The class monitor's previous deskmate had to drop out due to family issues, so the seat had been empty. But who would have guessed? Su-ran shook her head and walked straight towards me. She then extended her hand and politely said, "Long time no see. Can I sit next to you?" I was stunned for a moment. She was talking to me. Before I could think much about it, I heard Su-ran ask again, "Lu Chen, can I sit next to you?" At that moment, the homeroom teacher also came over and quickly told her, "I'm the lowest ranking student in the class, so you shouldn't sit with me. Go sit with the class monitor instead. He's the best student in the school, and you can study together, helping each other out." After hearing that, I wasn't angry. After all, it was the truth. The high school version of me. Although I wasn't a bad student, I often skipped classes, browsed the internet, and played sports. I could, on my own, bring the class average down by 2 or 3 points. Since I didn't do anything particularly bad, the homeroom teacher usually turned a blind eye. Su-ran refused the homeroom teacher's suggestion and smiled at him. "Thank you for your kindness, but I'll sit with Lu Chen. We know each other?" The homeroom teacher frowned and then glanced at me. He repeatedly warned me not to affect her studies. Su-ran's grades could easily compete for the top spot in the city. In my past life, Su-ran wasn't the top student, but she was still the third best. The reason she placed third was because she found out she was going to be betrothed to my family, which led to her breakup with her childhood friend. So she performed poorly in her exams. That's why the homeroom teacher treated her like a treasure. If Su-ran had become the top student, the teacher would have undoubtedly become a legend. His value would have skyrocketed, and his prestige in the school would have soared. But none of this concerned me. In this life, I just wanted to get into college, study finance properly, and then use the foundation I built from the past 50 years to take my family to greater heights. Thinking about this, I remained indifferent and stretched my arm out to block the seat next to me. I was used to sitting alone and didn't want anyone sitting next to me. Also, Su-ran, we didn't know each other before. I only saw you last night. So please take another seat to avoid affecting your studies. The whole class fell silent. No one expected me to reject such a top student. A beauty on the level of the school's goddess. Suran's expression froze for a moment, with an air of arrogance. She simply placed her backpack on the desk, and then pushed my hand away. With a huff, she sat down. "This seat isn't yours. If I want to sit, I'll sit." That face of hers, I had seen for 50 years, and now, every time I saw it, it made me feel extremely uncomfortable. I don't know how I could stand it for 50 years in my past life. I slammed the book in my hand onto the desk, which startled her. "Fine, sit wherever you want to sit. I have no right to interfere." Saying that, I packed my bag, picked up my things, and walked directly to the seat by the trash can. This spot had a bit of a smell, because it had been used for trash for a long time, but there was a seat, just for storing miscellaneous items. I immediately pushed the junk aside, and placed my bag on top. Then I picked up the basketball on the floor, and waved at the few guys sitting in the back near the window. They understood immediately, and quickly followed me out. We went to play basketball. Inside the classroom, the homeroom teacher's angry scolding echoed, like a rotten apple spoiling the whole barrel. But I ignored it. I wasn't the one ruining her good students, the ones following me. I didn't need to ruin them. They were already a bad bunch. Who says that bad students are bad people? Besides, in the future, they all turned out pretty well. The worst of them even bought a house in Kyoto. Although everyone's grades weren't great, it didn't mean their character or abilities were lacking. They just didn't focus on their studies. The whole morning, I couldn't be bothered to attend class, and spent the time playing basketball with them. We played all morning. At noon, after the last game, I was about to go buy some iced water when suddenly a figure approached. She handed me a bottle of water and said, "Here. It's not iced. It's best not to drink iced water right after exercising." The guys around us kept sneaking glances at me, laughing quietly. "Chen Jie, didn't realize you were so charming. Bro, we envy you." "Yeah. And it's not even iced water. So considerate." I glared at them fiercely. "Stop joking around, or next time I'll dunk on you from across the room. I'm 1.8 meters tall, and I'm on the basketball team, so dunking is easy." Then, I looked at Suran, and my expression turned cold again. "No thanks, I'm used to drinking iced water." Suran, even though our families have a business relationship, let's forget about the arranged marriage my dad mentioned. I know you have a childhood friend, and you're close with him, and you like him a lot. I'm not interested in you, so we don't need to know each other. I'll talk to my dad, and it won't affect the business partnership between our families. That way, it'll be better for both of us. After saying that, I handed the water back to her, then grabbed the basketball and walked away, rather than getting entangled and ending up like last time, with no purpose in death. It's better to set clear boundaries early on. Since school is not far from home, it's only about 20 minutes. I usually go home for lunch and rest. When I reached the bus stop, I was about to get on the bus when Suran hurriedly jogged over from a distance, her face ashen as she grabbed my arm. I knew she was angry because I had just rejected her water. After all, it had been like this in my past life, from the moment we got married until I passed away at 70. Whenever I didn't do something she liked, or showed even the slightest resistance, she would immediately get angry. But this life, she was no longer my wife, nor my lover. I wouldn't pamper her anymore. I was about to forcefully pull away from her, but unexpectedly, her strength suddenly increased, and she pushed me against the bus stop sign. She grabbed my shoulders, and with a slightly accusing tone said, "Lu Chen, don't think it's just you who's been reborn. If you keep treating me like this, do you believe I'll report you to your dad? You're bullying your future wife." My mind went blank, and it spun quickly. After a long while, I finally came back to my senses. Su Ran was reborn too. Seeing me stunned and silent, Su Ran continued, Lu Chen, I'm your wife. In our last life, after 50 years of marriage, you couldn't even bring yourself to speak loudly to me. This time, you scolded me several times from yesterday to today. I saw her eyes filled with tears, a bit of grievance in them. I furrowed my brow. She really was reborn. But from our first meeting yesterday to today, her behavior was nothing like the Su Ran from my past life. It was as if she had been possessed by someone else, with Su Ran's personality. When she was younger, she was a business queen, and when she grew old, she was the head of the family, known as Su Leu Tai. Her influence outside was far greater than mine. Not only would she never have been wronged in front of me, but even if she had to endure hardship, she wouldn't have said a word to me. I couldn't understand what was going on, and I couldn't be bothered to think about it anymore. Since we were both reborn, then let's each make up for our own regrets. In her past life, her childhood friend was torn apart, and she was forcibly married to me, living an unhappy life. In my past life, I married a woman who didn't love me. My dad also worked himself to death because of the company's issues. In the end, my fate, apart from dying without purpose, was that I didn't fully fulfill my dad's last wish, to take the company's products to the world, and I left this regret for the rest of my life. I looked at Su Ran and said seriously, Su Ran, since you've also been reborn, then that's even better. This time, I won't stand in the way of you and your childhood friend. You don't need to get close to me just to make your family cooperate with mine. In our past life, you married into my family, and after all those years, you know very well that my dad and I are not like that. Besides, in our past life, you were the business queen. With the knowledge you mastered, even without my family's help, you could still shine brightly in this life. As I finished speaking, I took a deep breath. After all, this woman was the one I loved for 50 years. Letting go was certainly painful, but after the despair I experienced before dying in my past life, there was no way I could love her again. I also learned an important lesson. Rather than chasing someone who doesn't love me, why not wait for someone whose eyes are filled with love for me? At least, in their world, they would love me. Now, I would willingly use all my strength to love someone who loves me, but I would never love someone who doesn't love me again. Su Ran, goodbye. After saying that, I turned to leave. At that moment, a person on a scooter pulled up in front of us. The person on the scooter took off their sunglasses and grinned at Su Ran. Ran, yeah, I've come to pick you up. You're making me drive an extra half hour every day to pick you up. Why are you transferring schools? I recognized the person on the scooter. He was Su Ran's childhood friend. His name was Wang Ziding. His family had started an electronics factory, but later lost quite a bit. Although his family wasn't doing great, they were still wealthier than most. Su Ran's father had originally been a partner in the electronics factory, but later sold his shares. And of course, Su Ran and Wang Ziding had grown up together. This Wang Ziding, because his father's factory wasn't doing well, he gradually stopped paying attention to him, and he became the scooter boy. But he was still quite good to Su Ran, never dragging her down, turning her into the scooter girl. Perhaps to Su Ran, this was the reason she could never forget Wang Ziding. He became the scooter boy, but couldn't bear to hurt Su Ran or let her become a rebellious girl in society. At that time, I didn't know Wang Ziding yet, but I didn't want to know him either. I glanced at him and turned to leave. Behind me, I heard Su Ran's hurried footsteps. Lu Chen, you jerk! When I reached the intersection and waited for the light, I subconsciously glanced back and saw Su Ran getting on Wang Ziding's scooter. I no longer had any lingering feelings for her. I looked at the blazing sun above, and the sunlight pierced my eyes, causing tears to fall. All that love growing over time, sticking together through thick and thin, was all nonsense. I gave my heart and soul, loved her for 50 years, and now reborn. 50 years of feelings. Couldn't compare to a childhood friend. When I got home, I took a few days off, not wanting to go to school and see her. Although my dad was angry, he couldn't argue with me. Since my mom passed away early, he still spoiled me, his only child. He usually let me do whatever I wanted. After resting for a few days, I told my dad I wanted to transfer schools. He stared at me in shock. It's almost time for the college entrance exam. Why are you transferring now? You want to transfer at this point? What about her? I deliberately waved my hand impatiently. When did I agree to that? Dad, I've told you, I don't like her. And she has someone she likes. And that person isn't me. Sometimes a forced relationship never works. If you keep pushing me, I'll just jump off the 3rd floor. I'll go to Mom. The villa was only 3 stories, but it was over 10 meters high. I'd hit the ground first. No need to explain further. Naturally, the ghosts would come for me. Every time I used my mom to threaten my dad, and it worked this time too. I looked very much like my mom. And if I were lost, he'd probably lose all hope in life. He could only agree to me. Okay, calm down first. I'll contact the school for you. Then I smiled at my dad. Now, that's my good dad. Don't worry, as long as I transfer, I'll get into a good university. Then study finance and work hard, and come back to help you with the business. Mom's spirit will bless us, and our father-son bond will thrive. My dad was so moved. He hugged me and cried for a long time. The next day, my dad sold me out. Suran came to the house. She pushed open my bedroom door, and I was still asleep. I gradually opened my eyes and saw her expertly walking to the window, pulling the curtain wide open, letting the bright sunlight pour in. It immediately blinded me. I couldn't open my eyes. With some anger, I said, Suran, are you crazy? This is my house. You can't just barge into my room. What are you trying to do? Suran crossed her arms, staring at me. With a calm tone, she said, This is your house. Your room, but I've lived here for 50 years. This is my house too. My room. She still spoke in the same tone as in our past life. In our past life, when we got married, it was in this very house. Naturally, my room became our bedroom. She went straight to my wardrobe, pulled out the clothes and underwear I often wore, then threw back my blanket. Since I like to sleep without clothes, my body was fully exposed in front of her. I quickly grabbed some clothes to cover myself, feeling extremely angry. Suran, are you out of your mind? Suran looked at me, still calm, and chuckled as she stroked her chin. I thought you. Get out. I yelled, I won't leave. What's the matter? I've dominated you for 50 years. And even if we're reborn, do you think you can escape my control? Suran smiled and looked at me, which only made my anger rise. In our past life, not long after we got married, I knew she didn't like me. She had no feelings for me. I brought up divorce, but she refused, citing her pregnancy as the reason. She even said, This life is what it is. We'll just make do with it. And now, fate had given her the chance to not be with me. So why cling to me? Suran, you're only going to make me despise you. Only going to make me hate you over time. After saying that, she froze. But I didn't bother with her anymore. I just focused on putting on my clothes and pants. After finishing getting dressed, I was about to leave. But suddenly, Suran hugged me from behind. Lu Chen, I'm sorry. The question I didn't answer in our past life, I'll answer it for you this time. I didn't give her a chance to finish. I directly pulled her hands off me. You don't need to say anything. Before I died in my past life, I already knew the answer. I loved you for 50 years, but I can't love you anymore. Please let me go. I turned to look at her. In this life, can we just be the closest strangers? We are still young. Only 18. There's plenty of time ahead. And slowly, you'll forget about me, the one you don't love. In our past life, you had regrets, and so did I. In this life, let's each try to make up for our own regrets. Is that okay? Suran's eyes were red, tears streaming down her face, and she shook her head quickly. No, you're my husband. 50 years of feelings. Can you bear to let it go? I swallowed bitterly. I won't say I don't care, because that would be impossible, but I don't want to repeat the same mistakes. I can bear it. Suran wiped her tears away. And with determination in her eyes, she said, I know you don't believe me, but in our past life, you loved me for 50 years. This time, let me love you for 50 years. No matter what I said. She wouldn't listen to reason. But I could never believe her. Even with this second chance, after heading downstairs, my dad saw Suran and me coming down together, and his face immediately lit up with a smile. Come, son, daughter-in-law, I made breakfast for you. I glared fiercely at my dad, then grabbed a bowsie and stormed off. Suran also grabbed a bowsie and followed me closely. I ran, and she ran too. I stopped and she stopped. It was really annoying. How did I never notice how annoying she was in the past life? For a full half-month, she was with me every second of the day. When I played basketball, she sat by the side, basking in the sun, waiting for me. When I surfed the internet, she'd sit beside me and watch movies. Even when I went to the bathroom, she waited for me outside. In no time, the whole school was buzzing. Everyone was confused. How could such a top student, the best in the school, be in these rumors? They said I was a rich second generation, and that Suran was trying to climb into my circle. But Suran didn't care about any of that. Every day, she just followed me around. Until one day, Suran didn't come to school. Without her chattering next to me, I felt a bit more at ease. Until the end of the school day, she still wasn't there. It was the Friday at the end of the month, and we were about to have a 2-day break. With the college entrance exam approaching, a few friends from other classes who I was close with asked me to have a meal together. They said, after this, we'll all be in different universities, and we might not get to hang out much anymore without Suran around. I happily agreed, and we went to a food stall. It wasn't expensive, and the portions were generous. It was a place every student loved to go. After eating, it was already 10 o'clock. Our group stood by the roadside, waiting for a taxi. Suddenly, a guy patted me on the shoulder, then pointed to the hotel entrance and said, Chen Jie, look quickly. I followed his gaze. For some reason, I felt a sharp prick in my heart. Over the past period of time, Suran had changed a lot. She had been strangely kind to me, which made me question for a moment whether in our past life, she truly loved me for those 50 years. But it seemed it was all just my imagination. Right at that moment, Suran noticed me as well. Her face froze, and she quickly ran over to me. Wang Xiting followed right behind her. I looked at her with a cold smile. Not even graduated from high school yet, and already can't wait. Messing with me. Well, getting a room with your childhood friend? If I'm not mistaken, he's still only 18, right? Suran was also just 18, and Wang Xiting was a year younger than her. At that age, they didn't have a driver's license, and were riding around on scooters, living the street life. And now, they were sharing a hotel room. What kind of person could he be? When Suran saw my cold expression, she quickly tried to explain. Ben, please listen to me. Suran, are you being fake or not? I've said it before. Since fate gave you the chance, Just be with your childhood friend. Why keep bothering me? At that moment, a taxi came by, and I stopped it, then coldly snorted and got into the car. I immediately told the driver to leave quickly. On the way back, I couldn't help but shed tears. After all, I had loved Suran for 50 years. Now, seeing her leave the hotel with another man, it was hard to accept. But what could I do? I wanted to distance myself from her. So why was it still so hard to let go? When I got home, my dad came up to me, asking why Suran hadn't come back with me. For the past half month, Suran had been staying at our house, going to school with me. I sighed deeply, then said to my dad, I want to go somewhere for a while. I'll come back after the college entrance exam. The tone in my voice and my expression said everything. So my dad didn't ask any more questions. He just nodded and didn't even offer to buy me a plane ticket, because knowing him, if Suran asked him about it later, he'd probably just say, I bought a ticket to the seaside. My dad had told me that in my past life, I had followed his wishes and scattered their ashes in the sea. But this time, I wouldn't let my dad pass away so early. So, I took my mom's ashes instead. I took her urn and boarded a late-night flight. We landed in Haikou, and I carried my mom's urn, traveling along all the coastal cities. Finally, we arrived in the city my mom had always dreamed of. The Magic City. My mom was from here and had moved far away for love. To marry my dad was, in a way, the greatest blessing my dad could have earned in a lifetime. Now, the cosmetics company under the Liu family, many of the products are related to my mom. So, at dusk, I sat on the beach holding my mom's urn, looking at the setting sun. The last rays of sunlight were fading. Not far from me, on a bamboo chair, sat a mother and son. The young boy looked around 15 or 16 and seemed like he had just gone through a heartbreak. He cried to his mother, Mom, why doesn't the girl I like me back? Is there really any girl in this world who would like me? His mother gently patted his head and smiled. Fool! When I first saw you, I was just a girl in my 20s. Hearing these words, my heart trembled. Tears kept flowing down uncontrollably. If my mom knew I had suffered my whole life, loving a woman who didn't love me for 50 years, she would definitely be heartbroken. Time passed, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears mixed with snot. Mom, what did I do wrong? I loved her for 50 years. Was her heart really made of stone? Am I truly not worthy of love? Mom, I miss you. I hugged my mom's urn, tears falling uncontrollably on it. Suddenly, I heard a crying sound beside me. Then, another hand appeared on the urn in my hand. Mom, don't worry. This time, I'll take good care of Lu Chen. I swear. I froze, turned around and saw. It was Suran. She was holding my mom's urn with both hands, crying uncontrollably. I instinctively tried to get up, but she immediately embraced me, sobbing, Lu Chen, give me a chance. Let me finish what I have to say. Please, I'll finish. And if you still want to leave me, I promise I won't bother you again. I didn't say anything. Suran knew I was giving her a chance, so she quickly wiped away her tears. With red eyes, she said, Lu Chen, I know you've always thought I liked Wang Ziding, even in our past life. But you're wrong. Totally wrong. I've never said I liked Wang Ziding, and I don't know who told you that. Wang Ziding and I are childhood friends. We grew up together. That's true. But who says that childhood friends must love each other? In our past life, at first, I didn't like you, so I was cold to you. But later, after I got pregnant, didn't you notice? That I treated you much better? When you asked for a divorce, I didn't agree. Because I'm a woman, and I can be stubborn. Can't you see that? The reason I said all that was because I slowly started to like you. In our past life, the pressure from our two family companies was suffocating me, and I had to find time to go abroad to perform violin concerts. It was really exhausting. I knew you were good to me, but every time I was so tired that I just wanted to lie down and rest when I came home. And I really don't like those expensive brand bags or jewelry. Didn't you notice that the ring and bracelet I wear are the ones you bought for me when we first went shopping together? When she said that, I suddenly remembered. Although both our families were wealthy, she never wore the expensive jewelry I bought for her. She always wore the ones I got her from that street vendor. Seeing my stunned expression, she continued. Over the years, slowly through our time together, even an iceberg would melt. Let alone the way you've treated me so kindly. When you asked me before you passed away, did you ever love me? At that time, I hesitated for a moment. But that hesitation wasn't because I didn't love you. I'm not good at expressing myself. And all along, even as I grew old, I was still stubborn. At that moment, I was just thinking about how to word it. But then you ... She stopped and started crying. She kept reaching out, lightly hitting me, sobbing, "Why did you die so quickly? Without my permission. How could you die?" I hadn't even said. You just left. At that moment, I wanted to tell you, I love you. I really loved you. I, Su-ran, love you, Lu Chen. On the day you passed away, I cried all night long. Crying. And then I fell asleep. When I woke up, I realized I had been reborn in this life. I won't let you come find me. I'll come find you. But then you, this jerk, either scold me or yell at me and treat me so coldly. I only understood after. We played basketball that day. You've also been reborn. I know. In our past life, you were so tired because of me. But wasn't I tired too? I gave you 2 sons and 2 daughters. I also helped you manage the Lu family business. Can't you understand me? She said this, and then threw herself into my arms, crying uncontrollably as I watched her speak. I slowly began to reflect on the life we shared. Although she had always been distant with me, she was very family-oriented. When the Su family became powerful, she didn't forget to help the Lu family. Aside from her indifference towards me, it seemed everything else was fine. Watching Su-ran cry in my arms, I sighed. I kept my hand on her back, comforting her. After a long while, she felt a bit better. She finally lifted her head and said to me, "What happened at the hotel? It's not what you think." Wang Ziding's grandparents came from the county, and because there was no room at their house, I took them to the hotel to get a room. Wang Ziding was just with me on the way. And Wang Ziding and we've always just been childhood friends. We grew up together, but there was never any romantic feelings. Wang Ziding has always just seen me as an older sister. If you don't believe me, we can go back to my hometown now. My childhood friends, my parents all know about it. In our past life, I had heard from others that his parents were the ones who separated her and her childhood friend and made her marry me. But I never looked into it or asked her about it. This was also a big knot in my heart. Seeing me hesitating, Su-ran took out her phone and made a call, yelling into the phone, "Get over here now." Wang Ziding quickly ran out from behind a nearby trash can, hurrying towards us. Yeah. Su-ran immediately hugged me, claiming her territory, and said, "Call me sister-in-law." Wang Ziding seemed a little scared of Su-ran and quickly called out to me, "Sister-in-law." Then, after Wang Ziding's explanation, I finally understood. that his parents didn't control him much. If it hadn't been for Su Ran, Wang Ziding wouldn't have been the scooter boy, but a street thug. And Wang Ziding had someone he liked, the daughter of a KTV owner he frequented, around the same age as him. They had agreed to get married when they were old enough. That's when it hit me. In our past life, when Wang Ziding got married, Su Ran had asked me to go with her, but out of spite, I didn't go. And the bride was that KTV owner's daughter. It turned out, he had liked that girl from the start, but Su Ran had been stopping them. That's why Wang Ziding returned to school and ended up at an average second-tier university. Only then did the KTV owner's daughter agree. After understanding everything, it felt like the pressure in my heart had been released, and by then, the sun had already set. Su Ran looked at me and said very seriously, "This time, I'm not touching the violin again. I just want to fulfill our dad's wish and take our mom's cosmetics to the world. Lu Chen, will you give me this chance?" I was in a good mood. Holding my mom's urn, I stood up and walked directly towards the hotel. When I saw that Su Ran hadn't followed, I called out, "Let's go!" Back to the room. The seaside gets really cold at night. Don't catch a cold. Su Ran's face lit up with joy, and she quickly ran over, looping her arm around mine, resting her head on my shoulder. At this moment, Wang Ziding came running up. "Sister, brother-in-law, I can't even book a room with my ID. What should I do?" Su Ran pointed to a nearby bridge arch and mischievously said, "There's a bridge over there. You can make do for now. Tonight is the most important night for me and your brother-in-law, so I don't care about you." After that, Su Ran hurriedly grabbed my arm and pulled me towards the hotel. A few months later, I smiled as I looked at the 2 admission letters in my hand. I didn't get into a top university, but I managed to get into a decent first-tier one. After all, I only had 3 months to prepare. Even though I was reborn, it still wasn't enough. It was only thanks to Su Ran's help in the final stretch that I managed to do well. Otherwise, I would have only gotten into a second-tier university. And Su Ran, during these last months, was sweetly in love with me. Her mood was great, and she was in great shape and ended up as the top scorer in the city. But she didn't go to the best universities, like Tsinghua or Bader. She chose to go to the same university as me. Su Ran kissed me on the cheek and laughed. "This life I'll give you to more kids. How about it?" I nodded. Okay, I loved her for 50 years. What's wrong with loving for another 50 years? The end.